Bill Grudy here for Indivisible Lake County. This is what's going on.
Outrage this afternoon after the Trump administration's decision to freeze billions of dollars in education grants.
Nationwide, it's almost $7 billion. In the state of California, we're at $939 million. And here in Lake County, it's a staggering $17 million, 15% of the budget. Get ready for a deep dive as I sit down with County School Superintendent Brock Falkenberg. We talk about the effect this freeze has on students, families, and our local economy. And we talk about things that all of us can do as we stand together to get this country back on track again. Brock, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
I know the freeze is extremely important to you, and it's top of mind for us at Indivisible as well. They're freezing something like $7 billion in funding for schools nationwide, $800 million for schools in California. Do you have any idea at this point what the impact in terms of dollars would be right here in Lake County?
Well, Bill, actually, as we've taken a look at this over the last couple of weeks, the amount of funding that's being withheld in California has actually grown from initial projections of about $800 million to now $939 million. So another growth of roughly 15% of funds being withheld. We know across the state that there are districts that are now eliminating programs, one of them being programs for migrant youth. And locally, the migrant youth work is led by Butte County Office of Education, and we anticipate that that work will be pulled. So we're going to see a loss of funding to support our migrant youth. We're going to see a loss of funding to support some of our students with special needs. We're going to see a loss of funding to support teacher preparation and quality teacher outcomes. We're going to see a loss of support for anything that is supporting one group of students who may have additional barriers or obstacles to overcome in order to succeed in school.
But do we have a dollar figure yet for Lake County?
We had a dollar figure, and with the revisions, I don't know what that actual funding is. The last time I looked, it was about $17 million.
Just for Lake County,
Just in Lake
right here. What percentage of your budget would $17 million be?
Well, you know, miraculously, that ends up being about 15% of our school district budgets.
Wow. So what's going through your mind right now as you figure out how to deal with this?
First of all, I want to approach this from a positive perspective.
Yeah.
We are going to find ways to continue to work with every student that comes through our front doors. Those ways may shift. They may not look the same. The funding levels the funding elements may come from other areas, and so therefore would have impact across a broader spectrum of our overall budget. But we will continue to support each and every student that comes across our doorstep. And that is the fundamental impetus of public education, is that we serve the neighborhood children, and we do everything we can to support each and every one of those children that come across our doorstep. The fear is, if these funds continue to be withheld and they are not released, what are the long-term impacts? Either we will have to make some cuts in those particular programs or make cuts elsewhere so that we can continue to fund that work and that effort.
There are summer programs in effect going on right now. What do we know about the effect on those programs? And what's the effect potentially going forward into the fall?
Well, the timing of this has been just terrible. The summer programs were already underway and moving forward before we heard anything about funds being withheld. So those programs this summer will continue. We just don't know whether they will be fully reimbursed or not.
So are adult education programs like Teach Lake County, like the adult education program that we just did a film about, the high school diploma program, the MA program, CNA programs, are those kind of programs affected by what's coming down the pike?
All of those programs potentially are impacted by federal funds being withheld. A great deal of funding to support career technical education across this nation is provided by the federal government. So the CNA classes, the adult ed programming, all receive federal components to the funding that we utilize. The Teach Lake County element, while we fund the actual instructional pieces, there are grants available for the new teachers that help offset some of the costs. And so that will impact the ability of individuals to access Teach Lake County or other teacher preparation programs.
You spoke about finding alternate sources of revenue. What's out there? And I know we keep hearing out of Washington that the federal government, the objective of this approach is to get more money to the states, but I don't see that happening. Are there other sources of revenue that you could tap into that you have your sights on right now?
There are not specifically identified other sources of funding. When I talk about other sources of funding, I mean our general fund, at which point, in the long run, right, we might have some carryover funds that we're able to utilize to support a year, but ultimately you're going to have to look at cuts in the general fund to continue to support these programs or elimination of those programs.
So folks have asked us, what about food programs in the school, which is so critical? Are they on the line as well?
The specific funding identified for food, the free and reduced lunch program, has not been impacted by federal funds being withheld. But that doesn't mean that in the long run we're not concerned about it. California now funds free and reduced lunches for all students across the state. So California submits or augments the federal amount of funds with additional funding. We are concerned about the ability to continue that augmentation with the limitations on the state budget right now.
What about the ripple effect? Maybe you can you speak to the ripple effect of how these cuts might affect families, businesses, and the community at large?
What has been floating through my mind the last couple of days, and although the County Office of Education does not receive any funding to support Healthy Start, the Healthy Start funding has been a problematic issue over the last 6 months. And as a matter of fact, just yesterday, I believe an executive order was signed to eliminate any any Healthy Start funds to support migrant families or non-documented families. Traditionally, we've never asked the question, are you documented or undocumented? We've supported kids who meet eligibility requirements. So what happens when children of migrant families are unable to access preschool? That means their families are unable to work. That means that their families then become a burden on our local community. Ultimately, we would like to see a structure that supports all children, regardless of their status.
What are you hearing from your friends and colleagues, other superintendents across the state about what's going on in their communities and their districts?
I think the struggle that we are in right now is that we continue to be reactive. And I hear tremendous amounts of frustration, which is a reactive response to policy shifts and changes over the last 6 months. But I don't think we have reached that point in problem solving where we've grown beyond the frustration and really said, how do we take where we are and move this toward a solution? And I don't know what it is we need to get there. Sometimes it's just a little bit of time. But again, this is where I started that first question off, is I am confident that we will, regardless of the federal funding questions, continue to serve every kid that comes across our doorstep.
Now, you and your colleagues are going back to Washington, D.C. in the fall. What are your hopes for that effort?
Well, actually, we've got quite a large group. We have over 20 county superintendents going back to Washington, D.C. On this trip. We tend to go once or twice a year. And the purpose of sending the county superintendent specifically is to really build a relationship with the individual Congress members and their staff. We might get 20 minutes, a half hour, sometimes an hour with the member or their staff. So we're not going to change the world in that half hour or an hour. But what we are going to do is be able to identify key issues for each congressperson and have our staff back in Washington, D.C., our advocate back in Washington, D.C., continue the conversation and continue the work on behalf of California students.
What have you been hearing from Mike Thompson's office, Congressman Mike Thompson?
Mike Thompson's always been extremely supportive of the needs of California schools, the needs of Lake County schools, the needs of Northern California. So I reach out to Mike and his staff regularly, always feel a great level of support. If I were to express any frustration with the current status of the situation, is that getting the support of a Democratic congressperson doesn't change the flow or the conversation. We know we've got his support, but right now, with the leanings at the federal level all being aligned, the Democrats don't have a strong voice. I really believe that the way that we succeed as a society is that we learn to work together. We all have different opinions, we all have different thoughts, we all have different values, but I don't think we're that different. So coming together and finding ways to problem solve and compromise and collaborate becomes key.
At Indivisible, what we're about largely is educating people, helping them to get the information they need to make informed decisions. What recommendation would you have to people who see the situation that the county is facing with respect to education, will, I'm sure, face with respect to healthcare and immigration? But in terms of your world, what can people do right now to help you in your fight to secure more funding?
Well, the efforts that I've been putting forth is just to educate the community. And the more that we can magnify that conversation, the more that we can repeat that conversation, the more that we can educate not just our community, but our surrounding communities, our family members, and others of the status of education across this nation, leads to positive change back in Washington, D.C. So I don't think it becomes a matter of trying to persuade, but just trying to share, here's what we're seeing in our community.
Well, Brock, I want to thank you so much for taking time to speak with us. I hope we can double back again as we work our way through this, and I admire your confidence, and I also very much admire your willingness to come out and be a forceful spokesman for this. So thanks again for being with us.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the time and energy that you're putting into this to share this message.
The most powerful messaging about the administration's policy is coming from community leaders who are willing to speak out and tell it like it is. Our key areas of interest right now are education, healthcare, and immigration. If you know of anyone who needs to be in the conversation about these subjects, please drop us a line at the email link in the description below. I'm Bill Grudy. Now you know what's going on.